good.
Okay, for friends that don't know, Canada and Alaska are in the process of collecting as many Indigenous prayers as possible that have been translated from the Baha'i texts, from the Baha'i prayers. So this one is in the Northern Shoshone language from the Yukon Territory, which is just south of Alaska. I have relatives over there. And this one is, of course, from the Báb. Ayera cho tauringia ju sohothan gonsosan, anga yohotzi, the janik neo tauringio shachlanaki bagetka, dawani gedu, no danganwi, sosan.
O God, my God, praise be unto thee for kindling the fire of divine love in the holy tree on the summit of the loftiest mount, that tree which is neither of the east nor of the west, that fire which blazed out till the flame of it soared upward to the concourse on high, and from it those realities caught the light of guidance, and cried out, Verily have we perceived a fire on the slope of Mount Sinai. O God, my God, increase thou this fire as day followeth day, till the blast of it setteth in motion all the earth. O thou, my Lord, kindle the light of thy love in every heart. Breathe into men's souls the spirit of thy knowledge. Gladden their breasts with the verses of thy oneness. Call thou to life those who dwell in their tombs. Warn thou the prideful. Make happiness worldwide. Send down thy crystal waters, and in the assemblage of manifest splendours, pass round that cup which is tempered at the camphor fountain. Verily art thou the giving, the forgiving, the ever-bestowing. Verily art thou the merciful, the compassionate. Abdu'l-Baha.
Thank you very much, Louise and Peter. Appreciated. I would like to welcome you all, whether from here or England, Alaska, anywhere. Thank you. And I particularly welcome Mr. Zane Rosen. Very welcome, Zane. Thank you. Tonight we have a very interesting evening because although Dr. Etemad has been with us for different times, this time he is offering a very cool session. Everything about it is cool. So I'm going to start with his bio, and you will know what I'm talking about. This is not what I wrote. This is what he wrote, so I would read. Kambeze Etemad is a dad, teacher, writer, musician, nerd, geek, and doctor. I changed the doctor to psychiatrist. I hope he did not notice it on my Facebook. But all in all, it is my honor that Dr. Etemad accepted to come here and speak about something very interesting, a layman's Odyssey to the Sublime. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. Please go ahead, Dr. Etemad. And also, thank you to every single one of you for participating and making these sessions more fruitful and beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Firuz, for always having these amazing venues. And I'm always delighted to be part of it when I can in general and to contribute to it. This time is a little different in that it's not so much a scholarly topic. It's more a personal journey combined with an artistic theme. So let me just pull up my slides and share them. All right, where are you?
You are a co-host.
Okay.
Dr. Etemad.
So let me get that there and okay, and then oh, where is it? All right, give me a second. It's like each time I do this, it works a little differently. All right, let's try it this way. All right, that's
Okay.
now let's get that. All right, how's that? Do you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm not someone who usually talks about myself, but it's kind of unavoidable given the topic. And I wouldn't choose to talk about myself, except that what this is really about is not so much my personal experience, but about the great story that I experienced, the great story of the genesis of the Baha'i movement. And the second reason is it's really a lesson for everybody about being open to discover within ourselves something we would never have expected to find within ourselves. That'll become a little bit more obvious as we move through the slides. Okay, so, all right, let me, okay. So as I was putting these slides together, it became obvious that this was becoming sort of a very self-indulgent journal about the journey itself for me. So there's always, as usual, there's always more here than can possibly be covered. So just bear with me. Let's start with the idea that this is a story of how I ended up writing poetry when I am by no means a poet of any kind. Not part of the Dead Poets Society. I'm part of the Non-Poet Society. I've always been a lover of words, whether it's song lyrics or wordplay, puns, prose. I myself love to write, but it's always been prose. I've always been enamored with the imagery and the ideas associated with words, but poetry was never something that I had a perceptual set for. Of course, I had been exposed to poetry and I loved anything that I encountered, but I never had a poet's brain, and I still don't. And the last time I had experienced any Shakespeare was in high school, up until my mid-40s, which is where this story begins. So about, I don't know, 14 years ago, there were several big changes going on in my life, and these will become relevant as part of the artistic story. There was a shrinkage happening in certain areas of my life because of just the kind of person I was evolving into. There were many, many social circles that were drying up in my life. There were many long-standing relationships that were coming to an end, not really under my control. Some of them, of course, I made some stupid mistakes, but a lot of them were just because it was just happening. The second big thing was that we decided to homeschool our daughter. And she just was one of those kids who wasn't getting enough in the school environment. And we looked into private schools, and all that would have turned out to be was spending an enormous amount of money for nothing any better than the public school. And there was just a variety of stressors going on, particularly related to work. A lot of among the other things that were shrinking were sort of the avenues that had been available to me for expressing my personal creativity as a musician, as a writer. And a lot of my Baha'i niches were disappearing. The niches where I was able to offer my educational services, my artistic things, and even some of the general processes of the community, they just seemed to be shrinking. So I found myself in a greater sense of disconnection and focus on a few things. And then comes 2013, where my daughter, at the time 9 years old, and we come across in a bookstore a book by the author Ian Dosher, who is both an English professor and a fan of Star Wars. And he wrote a book called William Shakespeare's Star Wars. And it basically, he turned the movie, the first movie, into a play written in Shakespearean-style poetry. And we gobbled it up, and we read all the sequels. And it was just a really cool experience. And so it became an introduction for my daughter in the context of homeschooling to Shakespeare, since which Elise is just more of a Shakespeare and Shakespeare fan than even I. And it was a chance for me to read Shakespeare again, which I hadn't read in 30 years. So I picked up a book of 4 tragedies, a book of 4 comedies, trudged my way through them painfully, but also enjoying it. And what started to happen was I started to think in the rhythm of the poetry, which is iambic pentameter. And we used to call it IP at home. So just a quick explanation of what iambic pentameter is. Pentameter means 5 meters, and the meter is iambic. And iamb is a 2-syllable rhythm, ba-bump, ba-bump. A pentameter means 5 of those 2-syllable beats. So it's like 5 heartbeats, ba-bump, 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 ba-bump. That's iambic pentameter. Shakespeare often wrote unrhymed lines, and some of his sonnets he would rhyme. My daughter and I found ourselves quipping and joking and making fun and having wordplay in little quick IP lines that rhymed. So here was the first thing that came out of my mind, called Methinks an IP. Whenever I do read of Shakespeare's prose, my mind is naturally inclined, it goes, to imitate his lofty language due, iambic and pentameter speak to. And then one night when Elise basically wasn't wanting to go to sleep, this came out. For now it is the time to go to bed. Upon the pillow lay thy sleepy head. Hygiene proceeding, then with reading do, I pray and sing, then snuggle up with you. So this is how it started, with these very brief little blurbs that most of them didn't get written down at the time. Literally, we would be in the kitchen cleaning dishes or whatever, and we would just sort of quip back and forth in this sort of rhythmic rhyme. And then the poems became a little bit longer, and I wrote a poem about like not wanting to do anything on a lazy Sunday and how I missed my family when they went away for a visit in North Carolina. So they became longer and they started to sort of accumulate. This was not something I was doing because I wanted to be a poet or because I was, trying to be artistic. It just was very natural. It just was whatever was going on at the time. It was just a way to process it and reflect it and sort of have fun about it. So it was just a very playful kind of experience. And then at some point, a few longer, like 4 or 5 pages long, stories came out. One of them was basically the basic history of the American Revolution. Elise, as a homeschool kid, was obsessed with the American Revolutionary War. And so we visited a lot of sites, and obviously she read and watched stuff on DVD and this and that. And in the process, we went on a trip to a reenactment of the Battle of Yorktown. And during that trip, it just came out of my head. I just started writing lines that essentially summarized the American Revolution up through basically the ratification of the Constitution. And then 2 other narrative poems were 2 family trips to Florida. I'll tell you a little bit more about the American Revolution one later, but here are some excerpts of the trips to Florida. And what happened was this IP storytelling just became a very playful, relaxing, and actually invigorating way to experience big things. So on our first trip in 2013, this is part of going to Harry Potter World at Universal Studios. There really is no way I can describe when Hogsmeade's magic scene you first imbibe. The village, train, and shops before your eyes, the silhouettes of buildings fill the skies, and Hogwarts so majestic in the rear, and Harry Potter music fills your ears. For fantasy has come to life so great, and mind is stirred while walking through the gate. Then off we go, adults and kid all young, engaging our imaginations flung. As if you're now part of the movie's world, from aisle to shelf to object, mind is whirled. As much to buy a treat or souvenir, it's more to move about a world that's dear. With people, places, things, both big and small, that texture give to books and movies all. We get to see, hear, smell, and taste and touch, and interact with lively humor such. Skipping a little. The rest of all that day is just a blur of mundane and insignificant whir. For what detail of Whole Foods or a meal can from the primacy of memory steal imagination's fancy brought to life, so thick it can be cut through with a knife, or chocolate frogs and wizard cards to keep, and magic dreams to lull you off to sleep. Then there's more, but we can skip that. So these three stories, the American Revolution and 2 Florida trips, became longer poems. And right at this time, I found that I was going through something where a lot of my own big energies, my energies as an educator, my energies as a Baha'i, my energies as an artist were shifting. I was needing to find new directions for channeling them because the old ways or the usual ways sort of didn't exist anymore. So my educational energy went into homeschooling, but it also went into essentially educating the treatment team at the hospital that I worked with, educating them without their knowing the source, the principles of consultation. And we began to operate according to a Baha'i consultative process. And I just found that my Baha'i energies were being redirected to less mainstream activities and more personalized ones. And here's just another sample of the second trip, but we can skip that. So in 2015, when some of this mental shifting had occurred, and I was in the work setting and we were homeschooling, we were in gear, this idea came to mind because at this point, I'd been doing some poetry now on and off for a year and a half. And the idea that came to me, as soon as I had it, I was like, that is just crazy. Like, don't even consider doing that. Like, forget it. But I couldn't let go of it. And in fact, the first line popped in my head, which was a phrase that the Báb used when he was on trial in Tabriz that happens to be in iambic pentameter. I am the promised one. And as soon as I realized that, I was hooked. Like, there was no turning back. And the crazy idea was to write the stories of the Báb and then Baha'u'lláh, sort of in the spirit of the great epic poems of the ancient past. And that's essentially what ended up happening. And so it took I started writing a summer at Greenacre when we took Elise to Camp Greenacre. And by September, the first book was written. It only took 4 months to write the story of the Bob's ministry and life. And I don't even know how it possibly came so easily and so quickly, because I don't do this. And it just came. And the way that I would write, okay, on the weekends, I would spend some time just sort of sitting in a chair and writing. But many days, the writing would be in the 3 or 4 minutes between patients that would come knock on my door at the office at the hospital. So it was literally in little micro bits, but it was continuous and it was laced throughout the days for 4 solid months. And I would start by jotting out, okay, what's the next episode? What's the next scene? Jotting down what are the main things that happened. And I would very often, very, very often actually go back to the history books to make sure that my recollection was accurate. And then once I had those jots, then it would be like, okay, let me look at that, picture that scene in my head, and then boom, it would come out in a couple of verses. It was really something I'd never experienced before. It was literally like I had a 4-month seizure, like something had taken over and like made this happen, whether and I sort of had to get out of the way. I genuinely believe that this was an act of divine grace that really was much bigger than me. This was not about, oh, Kambeze is able to do this or that. It really had nothing to do with the individual who like did it. It had much more to do with what needed to be said. And I definitely believe that for both books, there were angels who helped me. Angels being either living people or people who have passed on, who provided emotional or spiritual or creative support. And for the first book, my angel for volume 1 was a dear friend who had passed away a few years earlier, actually 10 years earlier. I had met her and worked with her when we had lived in Switzerland. She was an English teacher. She loved words. She just loved words. And so whether it was Beatles lyrics or making fun of things that George Bush Jr. used to say, or poetry or things that are found in the newspapers, she just loved words. And I definitely felt like Heidi was really, really inspiring me and it's supporting me. And there's this quote by Baha'u'lláh that talks about this, and I felt like this was my personal experience with this. Know thou of a truth that the soul, after its separation from the body, and then he elaborates about that, and then he goes on to say, the light which these souls radiate is responsible for the progress of the world and the advancement of its peoples. They are like unto leaven, which leaveneth the world of being, and constitute the animating force through which the arts and wonders of the world are made manifest. All things must needs have a cause, a motive power, an animating principle. These souls and symbols of detachment have provided and will continue to provide the supreme moving impulse in the world of being. So thank you, Heidi. So after the book was written, I basically, sometimes how you feel after a seizure, I just kind of had to do nothing for a while. Just went to work, came home and did some homeschooling and sort of just did home stuff. And then it wasn't until a little bit later that it was time to think about how to publish it. So even though volume 1 was very quick to write, it took very long to do 2 things: edit it and learn how to self-publish. I didn't want this to become some big fancy book that gets published and blah, blah, blah. That's a big torturous process. I just wanted to manufacture a bunch of books and share it with friends and family. Like it was, my ambition was more about writing it and having a final product than making it a commodity. So I wanted to self-publish. At the same time, homeschooling was going on. The effort that I had put into building that treatment team revolving around the Baha'i consultation, I felt like I was in a clinical Camelot. It was the most remarkable expression of the Baha'i teachings, ironically, among a group of people who really knew nothing about the Baha'i faith. But because we were a coherent, basically sort of a work family, we had developed this ability to work. And not everyone is here because the nurse on duty, he was actually out off on the unit. So this was part of the sort of the spiritual upliftment that was going on at this time. And I found that I got support from unexpected directions. It was actually these people at work who were not Baha'is who were in fact the most excited for me about the publication of this book. Like they actually had little celebrations at work when they found out, and they wanted to order it immediately, and they wanted to hear it read. And even at one point, well, I'll tell you about that later. But during this whole time was a very steep learning curve about self-publishing. You know, getting a publishing operation, ISBNs, PCIPs, copyright, you know, finding a manufacturer, blah, 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 blah. And it just took a long time because I couldn't do this in little micro bits in between patients. It required chunks of time that didn't come around that easily. But it finally happened. And then it came time to edit. The thing about the editing is that it was very unusual because the book included a very specific meter, very idiosyncratic punctuation, poetic contractions and techniques, using diacritical marks for translating Persian words into English, specialized capitalizations, and other nuanced things. So as a result, the only person who knew what it needed to look like and sound like was me. So I couldn't outsource the editing to anybody. So I had to literally read every page 7 times. One time, only making sure every line was 10 syllables. A second time, making sure every line rhymed. A third time, making sure all the Persian words were transliterated right. Another time, blah, 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 blah. So the editing was torturous, but and very protracted. But it finally was finished. Then all the pre-publication steps finally led to dealing with manufacturing and like having a preface that included factual and stylistic notes and a little note about transliteration. And finally, it went live and was published in February of 2017. And I ordered a bunch of copies for myself and I shared it with friends and family. And then other people started to, look at it. And then they would ask me questions that I had not been prepared to answer. Like, well, what are you going to do with this book? And like, yada, yada, yada. And I was so like, well, I don't know. I just kind of had to write it. I didn't think about any of that. Like, it was really like a surprise that it was anything more than just something that I had no choice but to create. So rather than deal with the questions that people were asking me, except for certain kinds of questions I would answer, I decided to jump back in to the second book. But before we do that, I'm just going to share a little bit from this book. This is the opening page. Around the fire do come and we shall hear. A story, not a fiction, much more dear. No fabled fantasy, but real and clear. Though tragic, magic too, lives it'll steer. Illumine minds and hearts will set afire. Heroic actions from sublime desire. Of prophets, martyrs, saints, but not of old. In Mideast 1800s stories told. Of prophecy fulfilled, the old world dies, with thousands, tens of thousands, breaking ties, and living life a bold and novel way, as courage, love, and truth break a new day. Across the generations to our time, across the globe now millions join the rhyme. Within this whole unfolding drama true are archetypes embedded through and through, which manifest emblazoned do beget those precedents of virtue challenge set. The recapitulations have begun to be for generations that will come. So open inner eye and inner ear and hearken to a story with no peer. Imbibe and relish what is to unfold. Indeed, a wondrous story to be told. Okay, so here's a chapter later in the book about Badasht. Maybe it could be read in full during the Q&A if there's time, but I'm just going to read the little bit right there in bracketed in blue. And in this tableau tense in front of all, does Tahira appear before them all, arriving unannounced and suddenly, adorned and unveiled for all to see, her beauty unconcealed and trancingly. It's the pivotal moment of the entire purpose of what Badasht was about. It was one of my favorite chapters to write about because Baha'u'lláh and Tahira and Qudus use theatricality to educate the Baha'is. It's just beautiful. And that's the rest of the chapter on Badasht. And here's just a little bit from the trial of the Báb in Tabriz. The Báb does enter everyone he greets, and then he takes the only vacant seat. The prince's seat of honor self-assigns, as majesty and power from him shines. As dignity does from his being flow, mysteriously silent room does grow. Sometime the nerve to speak does no one show. Then finally the questioning does go. Who do you claim to be is firstly sought, and say what is the message you have brought. His voice rings strong and clear, and it does stun. I am, the promised one. And this is from On the Way to Tabarsi, some of the acts of Mullah Hussein and Qudus. When 7 die, the 7th one so meek, then finally does Mullah Hussein speak, allowing Babis to repulse the foe, and he himself upon his horse does go, pursuing one who killed that sweet Babi. The killer refuge takes behind a tree, and holding musket vertically in front, protects with tree and barrel from a front. On horse, Mullah Hussein sweeps down on foe, a single mighty stroke of sword let go. That stroke cuts through the tree, the gun, the man, bisecting all three full, like no sword can. And here's a little bit from the martyrdom of the Báb. Eyewitnesses were many, testified to what then followed, stunned and mystified. Then one row at a time, the firing squad took aim and fired, noise deafening filled the quad, as did the gun smoke shrouding all in dark. Anticipated, dreaded end, but hark, smoke lifting, the suspense of public swelled. Astonished were at what they all beheld. Incredulous the onlookers did see. Anis stood upright unconcernedly, unscathed, untouched, and smiling standing there, and no sign of the Báb now in the square. So there were a variety of discussions that followed from friends and family about what was it like, what was the experience of writing, of publishing, and, why did you do this and that? But the one that I found most endearing was an email from a friend I got from a dear friend, Sheila, actually Sheila Dean, who presented in this fireside series on nutrition several months ago. She sent me an email and she asked me questions. We're not going to go over it, but she asked me questions of the use of apostrophes and how did I choose where I would contract words, and then I gave her an answer. And then another question was, how did I verify that every line was in the meter? And she asked about why did I space different lines differently on different pages, and why did I change font on different chapters? And then she asked a little bit about the writing experience and, how did I write it? And then, she even said, oh, I noticed that even the title of the book is a line of iambic pentameter. So I got to enjoy sharing the experience of doing it with people who I had shared it with. And at the same time, I sort of jumped into writing the volume 2, which took much longer to write, but took much less time to publish, because now I knew everything that needs to be done in order to self-publish. But the writing was much more involved. So I started writing a month after the publication of the first book. This coincided with some very difficult things happening. We had some horrible traumas on site at the hospital where I worked at, but it brought us together, and other hardships where, this friendship with this group of friends, a group of non-Baha'is who were we just helped each other through each other's crises with our families, and the life and work. And they were just incredibly supportive of my writing process. And then my family, Melanie, Elise, and I, we had the great opportunity to go on a trip while I was writing book 2 that included going to Haifa and Bahji for the bicentenary of the birth of Baha'u'lláh. And so it was wonderful to be writing about Baha'u'lláh, after visiting his shrine. And it was having the book about the Báb fresh in my mind. My devotional experiences specifically with the Báb shrine were much more poignant because the whole story was in my mind. So I got to just basically mark that moment as part of the visit. But the writing took about 16 months. And there are a couple reasons why this book took longer. The main reason stems from the differences between the lives of the Báb and Baha'u'lláh. Baha'u'lláh lived 2.5 times as long as the Báb. That's an additional 45 years of very eventful ministry, obviously adding just more content. But beyond that, Baha'u'llah's ministry was more complicated. With the Báb's life, there was an overtness and a relative simplicity to his life. The landmarks of his ministry were dramatic, and there was an inherent magic in the contrast of his behavior and the surrounding darkness that was going on. It was a lot easier to turn that into poetry. Baha'u'llah's story is more elaborate, although it's not any less amazing or magical, but the magic of his actions and his words were subtler, or at least they were embedded in much less florid circumstances. And Baha'u'llah's impact involved interactions with so many people over stretches of time, from salt of the earth people in every walk of life to shrewdly manipulative sociopaths, and all the way up to the highest clergy and monarchs of the area, of the realm. So there was decades of his revelation. So for the second volume, many events in Baha'u'llah's story needed stage setting or context in order to appreciate their implications. So many of his scenes from his life took more time and effort to put together, basically in the form of the notes that I would jot about what's important about this situation leading up to the situation. And then the poetry would come after the notes. So it just took more time to digest such an enormous ministry. So what that boiled down to was that volume 1 was very fluid and flowing, whereas for volume 2, in order for the flow to come, I kind of had to build things, and then the poetry flowed. It was a daunting task. In the meantime, a couple of, other poems would come out that had nothing to do with the book or related to work. So a UDS is a urine drug screen. I worked at a drug rehab for 10 years. So a UDS was an everyday occurrence. So one day, I just wrote somebody's urine drug screen results, which was basically negative. I turned it into poetry, and I let everybody know that the patient wasn't using drugs clandestinely. The UDS results are finally in. Reporting to you now shall I begin, by saying it's of little consequence. The first thing, 'tis of no significance, a slightly high specific gravity, which really means he gave some normal P. The only positive result we got was for tricyclic screen, and this is not at all surprising given what he takes. Inconsequential UDS this makes. So it still would bleed out. It was still just the way my crazy brain was processing things for fun. And then this is something I'm sure everybody has experienced when your phone wants to suggest to you what you actually want to say. The autocorrect. Whenever I do talk into my text, my phone does try predicting what is next. My iPhone thinks that it's so freaking smart and guesses what it thinks is in my heart. And giving lines before what I have said presumes to then predict what's in my head. And then all snooty does it then commend iambic pentametric lines to send. Sometimes I hate my phone, but in the end, it helps me stay in touch with you, my friend. So this is where the dad joke sort of goofball is starting to come out more obviously. By now, it's probably late winter of late 2018, early 2019, where the editing is again going on for volume 2, all those early steps leading up to a publication. And in the preface of volume 2, I gave a shout out to Heidi for her helping me in volume 1. And I even gave a shout out to my teammates for being such a support during such a difficult and crazy time in writing volume 2. And it published in April of 2019, volume 2. So I want to share a little bit about how writing this book literally made me a little crazy. I kind of went overboard in, it's not that, and it wasn't even deliberate, like, oh, let me figure out, I'm going to write this, and I'm going to say this. And it was literally, it intruded in my head, like this needs to be part of it. And that's ended up what happening. But it's a monstrous book. It's 479 pages. So the other one was 200 and something. So I thought I would just share a little bit of the content. So there's a little bit of a prologue. And then the whole first section is going back and revisiting what happened in the Báb's ministry, but from the vantage of Mirza Hossein Ali. So all of those things that happened in Baha'u'llah's life parallel to the Báb's ministry leading up to his execution. So, and, for example, some of my favorite were how the Baha'is, and especially the chief disciples of the Báb, how they just adored Baha'u'llah. Another one was how the Báb, in his correspondence to Baha'u'llah, exhibited a humility and servitude that the Báb never displayed in his correspondence to anyone else, even the rulers of the world. And then, of course, I just love how Baha'u'lláh sort of executive produced the drama of Badasht very, very inconspicuously, because it was about the message, not who's the players. And then the next part 2, which is very long, is Baha'u'llah's ministry, Baha'u'llah's life as a Babi after the passing of the Bab. And it's the largest segment of the book. I can barely read it on my own screen, but like, for example, that's when Baha'u'llah suggests to the Bab that Azal should be the nominal head of the Babi community. And there's a very specific logic why Baha'u'llah suggested it, that all of the historians and critics of Babi to Baha'i transitional history never really get. But it's pretty obvious in the literature why. And then at one point, I took a digression after the reign of terror in Tehran ended, and I wrote some tributes to Hojat, Vahid, and Tahareh. And one of my favorite things that I wrote was the ode to Tahareh, and I'll share a piece of that later. One of my favorite is called Apotheosis of the Promised One. That's the chapter where the Maid of Heaven visits Baha'u'llah in the dungeon. And it's just one of my favorite events, and I just loved writing about it. And then the phenomenon of revelation. This one required a lot of research. I read through Taherzadeh's books. I read through a variety of other things about what is it like for Baha'u'llah from receiving revelation to writing it or dictating it, to transcribing it, to authenticating it, to distributing it. Like that entire process, because for me, it's always been very fascinating. And it is, for the Islamic mind, it is the greatest proof of the divine manifestations, is the phenomenon of revelation. And then, of course, there's the Garden of Rezvan. And then in part 3 is after Baha'u'llah has announced himself and his various exiles from Baghdad, including one of my favorites is his interrogation in Akka, the mechanism whereby his writings were copied and disseminated across the region, E.G. Brown's meeting of Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah's will and testament. So normally you'd think, okay, the passing of Baha'u'llah, but that's not where the insanity ended for me. I had a whole part 4 that was about, well, what did he teach? Why is this? So I did anything from take a few sections from God Passes By and sort of re-express them in iambic pentameter, but it's the concepts of the guardian, in poetry. And then there's a part 1 discussion of the covenant of Baha'u'llah, fundamental verities of Baha'u'llah's revelation, distinguishing claims and features of Baha'u'llah. The whole thing about the hidden mystery, the most great name, sort of the theology of it. And then part 2 of the covenant of Baha'u'llah. So it was a crazy ride for me to essentially write this, but I really couldn't stop. I just felt so driven to end the story with, well, what's the fruit of this story? It's not just that, hey, here were these 2 amazing beings, but what did they deposit in the world and what do we do about it? So I'll read little bits and pieces. There's a preamble, which is the opening to each of the 4 sections. Behind the veil of human life concealed, the hidden mystery, treasured symbol sealed. For part 2, to potencies and machinations yield, apotheosis, mystic forces wield. For part 3, the promised one progressively revealed, the splendor and the glory unconcealed. And for part 4, the seismic billows propagate afield, a golden legacy still unrevealed. And this is the opening page right here on page 32. The fire did kindle, then ignite, then blaze, to roar and tell heroic Bobby days. Though burning is subdued and flames recede, still more than half of stories yet to heed. So stay, let's feed the flame against the cold, to hear what yet indeed is to unfold within this wondrous story to be told. And just for Star Wars fans, I did do a shout out to Star Wars here. Inevitably fierce reply, alack, the powers of the Empire do strike back. I just had to share that. Okay, this is, there was 2 or 3 pages about Tahereh, but this is and throughout both books, there are episodes where Tahereh is involved, but I just felt like I had to write something to her because I just feel this connection to her. So actually, this is only the last few paragraphs of about a 2-page ode to her. O Tahereh, amazing sister mine, this lowly, earnest, trying brother thine, does pray he may one day be able to aspire to follow shadow left by you, as he, like thee, does earnestly apply to tread the path toward the light and try to everything he comes across reply with truth and beauty, creativity, and joy and justice, love, reality, and art and strength and grace and dignity, regardless of resistance of the world, effecting so advancement is unfurled. This brother with his life would be content, should even reach a minuscule percent of that which you have done magnificent. O Tahereh, all wonder swirls round thee. There are no words for love and praise of thee. May thy life spirit visit mine for me, to help and guide, to worthy brother be. This is about the revelation process. This is about Rezvan. Okay, so there was a regime change at work. The doctors banded together because the new regime at the hospital was basically enacting illegal policies and procedures. We confronted them and whistle blew, and we all got fired. So I was out of a job, and I ended up in Lombo and got a job at a new hospital. And in the midst of this, I took this theme to Spider-Man and rewrote it in iambic pentameter. I won't read it to you. And then the pandemic hit, and it was a time of isolation. And at the end, in the midst of that, I had some health issues that essentially told me I need to make some basic changes in my life. And I finally ended up making those changes and starting the company that I had envisioned for over 20 years. And there was a second wave of questions and discussion about the books, actually leading me to write a new preface for both of the books in order to clarify certain things about the poetry and when the speech of the Báb and Bahá'u'lláh is poeticized, that it's in no way to be misconstrued as the actual words or writings of the Báb and Bahá'u'lláh. So I rewrote the prefaces and made the revised editions, and they got republished a couple of years ago. And then at this point, Elise was in her senior year of high school. We had homeschooled her for 11 of those 12 years. And a month before the graduation, I had commissioned Elise to draw pictures to go with the poem about the American Revolution that I had written, because it really had been part of the family experience. So we published this book A Pentametric Revolution's Tale, with her illustrations. And I'm so proud of her. And I just had to gush about her. We dedicated it to Melanie, who is basically homeschool mom extraordinaire. And so I'll just read little bits of this poem. The French and Indian War made England poor. So George III, the king, said, we need more. We tax the colonies and we'll be well. And Parliament agreed with laws to tell. But little did they understand the folks across the ocean where rebellion stokes, protesting and boycotting more each day. Sam Adams and John Hancock say, no way. And so I won't read, all of it, but, it goes through from that point up through, but like you could just see the fun pictures. These are all like iconic images. Here is sort of a recasting of the opening of the Declaration of Independence. This is of when they were deliberating the US Constitution. I'll read this. America, God shed his grace on thee, but oh, unfinished business still had we. The blight and stain of human slavery would take a far worse war to purge and free. There still is all the treatment hideous, 'twas meted out to those indigenous, to reckon, heal a wound inglorious. An issue still most challenging to face, a vision of race amity embrace. To rectify these wrongs is what will take full spirit of America to wake. And what of women's role in this new world? Begun with revolution's course unfurled, 'twill need to be acknowledged and advanced, and going forward needs to be enhanced. John Adams' own wife Abigail did write to him on eve of Declaration's light. Remember you the ladies in the plan, for if they are forgotten thus by man, the ladies are determined to foment rebellion if no voice or represent. It was really like a really fun project that we did together. Like we just had such fun doing it. And I took the theme to Speed Racer, the television show I grew up with, and turned that into a poem. So the last thing is Elise, I love the Beatles, and Elise loves the Beatles, and Elise paints. And this was a gift she made for me, which is the Abbey Road sort of spanning over heaven. And I have it hanging up in my studio area, and I see it all the time, and I just absolutely love it. So one day I just wrote a little poem about it. Upon the carrier waves of music due, John Paul and George and Ringo somehow through. The senses vibrate eardrum, blood, and spine, and lyrics that do stretch the heart and mind. All somehow light a spark to touch the soul, transporting to kaleidoscope of whole. While scanning upwards firmament, behold, a cosmic Abbey Road does now unfold. As beetles do this diamond sky traverse, they pull me with a thread of song and verse, along with them across the universe. And of course, anybody who's familiar with their songs, there's a lot of shouting out to different lyrics. So quick reflections on this. Not enough time, but this is actually why I wanted to share this. This was not a scholarly work. It was not even an artistic work. It was a devotional act. It was a way of affirming devotion. It was a testament for me. And, you know, as Baha'is, Baha'u'lláh enjoins Baha'is to write a will and testament. Most of us focus on the will, but there's also a testament part. And for me, these two books, I consider my testament. So now I just have to really focus on the will part. But I often find that just by re-experiencing the stories in a way that I wrote it, as if I wrote it for myself, really kindles my own connection to these episodes. Like I said before, I didn't study poetry. I know nothing about meter, rhyme, measure, blah, blah, blah. It just sort of happened. It was crazy. I was possessed by this energy. The lesson is learning to embrace our unexpected amateur artistry. We all have it. We all are the reflection of the name of God, the creator. So we all are capable of creating something, either making something old into something new or turning nothing into something. It's a matter of discovering it. And artistry is less, okay, it can be a profession, yes, but it's not just a profession. It's an amateur grassroots currency of social life that everybody deserves to partake in. I'll have to skip all this. I have found over time that friends who are Baha'is as well as non-Baha'is, these books have been a portal for them to encounter the history and the writings directly. And like, there's no better purpose, like for me. And I like to contract words all the time now because of this. So there's so much more that I could say, but I would rather just stop here and just open it up to questions or thoughts, comments, your own experiences with your artistry, either professional or amateur. Let me close this. All right. Okay.
I am dumbfounded, and this thing doesn't usually happen. It is seldom happens. Let me read what Dr. Ahdieh wrote. What a beautiful and profound transformation, dear Kambeze. Thank you for sharing. You always inspired me.
Thank you.
And there are other people who are trying to order, and all in all, it was a very beautiful and unexpected fireside. Actually, that was one of the most interesting firesides that we've had. Very, very interesting. Louise is smiling and clapping for you. The friends are all showing their hearts. Peter would like to ask the first questions. Since it's 1 o'clock in the morning there, we will give the permission to him to speak. Dr. Etemad, would you like me to turn off the recording so it would be only your presentation, or would you want me to?
Oh, I haven't even thought about that.
Why don't I stop here?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Magnified be thy name, O Lord my God. I beseech thee by thy name, through which the splendor of the light of wisdom shone resplendent when the heavens of divine utterance were set in motion amidst mankind, to graciously aid me by thy heavenly confirmations, and enable me to extol thy name amongst thy servants. O Lord, unto thee have I turned my face, detached from all save thee, and holding fast to the hem of the robe of thy manifold blessings. Unloose my tongue, therefore, to proclaim that which will captivate the minds of men and will rejoice their souls and spirits. Strengthen me then in thy cause in such wise that I may not be hindered by the ascendancy of the oppressors among thy creatures, nor withheld by the onslaught of the disbelievers amidst those who dwell in thy realm. Make me as a lamp shining throughout thy lands, that those in whose hearts the light of thy knowledge gloweth and the yearning for thy love lingereth may be guided by its radiance. Verily, potent art thou to do whatsoever thou willest, and in thy grasp thou holdest the kingdom of creation. There is none other God but thee, the Almighty, the All-Wise.
He is the all-glorious, the most effulgent. O divine providence, O forgiving Lord, how can I befittingly sing thy praise or sufficiently worship and glorify thee? Thy description by any tongue is not but error, and thy depiction by any pen is an evidence of folly in attempting his formidable task. The tongue is but an instrument composed of elements. Voice and speech are not but accidental attributes. How then can I celebrate with the instrument of an earthly voice the praise of him who had neither peer or likeness? All that I can say or seek is limited by the grasp of the human mind and encompassed by the bounds of the human world. How can human thoughts ever scale the lofty summits of divine holiness? And how can the spider of idle fancy ever wave the frail web of vain imaginings upon the retreats of sanctity? Naught can I do but testify to my powerlessness and confess my failure. Thou art verily he who is the all-possessing, the inaccessible, he who is immeasurably exalted above the comprehension of them that are endowed with understanding. Abdul Baha.
Go ahead, Pina.
Okay, this is an oh beloved Abdul Baha. Wherever you are sorrowed or afflicted, wherever they wrong or persecuted you, you must remain generous, brave, and kind. Whisper this prayer with Abdul Baha. He is God, O Lord. I am single and alone. I am a chef and straw. I am but a feeble one, and thou art the Elbedo. Ain.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined to the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all, dost shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Submit thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes to the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind. Abdul Baha.
We have 3 more minutes. Gibby, do you want to say a French prayer? Or do you want to do it
Okay.
next time? Okay, perfect.
I'll say part of it because the lady who just read it in English. That's the one I had chosen in French.
Go ahead.
I'll just read one paragraph.
Go ahead.
Okay. Ô Dieu, tu es bon envers tous. Tu subviens aux besoins de tous. Tu les protèges tous. Tu leur confères la vie. Tu les as tous dotés de facultés et de talents. Ils sont plongés dans l'océan de ta miséricorde. Unis-les tous. Fais que la religion s'accorde et que les nations s'unifient afin qu'ils se voient comme une seule famille et regardent la terre comme un seul foyer. Puissent-ils tous vivre ensemble en parfaite harmonie. Merci.
Thank you, Gibby. Thank you. I just wanted to first thank Dr. Etemad Kambeze for his amazing presence tonight. It touched our hearts. It added to our thoughts. It provoked our intellect. It did many, many things. And it touched our soul as well. Thank you. Thank you. So till the next time, Kambeze,
You
I want you to know that we all love you.
love you all back.
Also, I wanted to thank everyone else. Thank you for being here. Shu, please, next week, love you. Mr. Perimal, thank you. Jinus John, thank you. Pina, I'm glad you're feeling better. Brenda John, see you soon. Kay Azar, HP, Gibi, bonsoir. Mr. Jiva, Patricia, thank you for coming tonight. Azar Khanum.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
It
you.
was very nice to see you and all the friends and Mr. Kambeze and with this beautiful poetry and history telling in a poetic way. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I wanted to thank particularly our friend from England, Peter.
Yes.
You're the king. I know it could be around 1:30 in the morning. Thank you. What time is it, Peter? Say something.
3 minutes past 1.
Okay. Okay. You see how detailed minded he is. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jiva, we're glad to see you. Thank you all. Simi Khanum, all of you. See you next week. It is because of you that we can make this place special. Thank you for being here. Love you.
Thank you.
For making it happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Love you, Pina.